Hey, everybody. So this week we are continuing in the topic and on the discussion of social institutions and social issues. Last week we talked a little bit about the job market and kind of what employment looks like from a macro perspective, that structural, functional, and social conflict. And so this week we're going to be talking about something as we bring it a little bit closer to home, excuse me, and it is families and relationships. Now, when I say bringing it closer to home, I say that because I encourage you to explore your family patterns and things that may come up in the readings. How would they pertain to your family system? Not so much that you got to answer that question in a discussion post, but just something to think about. Maybe some good dinner conversation with your family members. All right, so the first article that we are going to be reading this week is by Bonnie Thornton Dill, and the title of that article is Our Mother's Grief. Racial, ethnic women, and the maintenance of families. And what does that look like? When we talk about, or I should say, this author in exploring the family system as a whole. One of the things that she looks at is she looks at the perspective of the American family system and how that perspective has historically has been impacted by the female figurehead, by the mother, by the woman in the home, and specifically looking at it from a racial and ethnic perspective. Now, the thing about this article that kind of hits close to home is that she's looking at, while she's exploring the family functioning with the matriarch as the head, the reason why it hit close to home to me is because she's also looking at some very specific experiences that family members or the family systems may have based on not so much the identified head of the household for some family systems, but that the head of the household that was adopted, so to speak, or that kind of took the place of the matriarch. And we usually see that in families with dealing with race and ethnicity, simply because when we're looking at racial groups or ethnic groups, these are usually the women who had to have, I guess we could almost say like servant or subservient type of positions historically, and that they were seen as the caretakers of the families and the assistants or the maids, so to speak, in families. I mean, and when you look back at historically at some of this in movies and in television, I mean, you see some very prominent women of color who are functioning, or that their main role is as a nanny, as a maid, or as a caretaker. We've seen movies recently that have highlighted this role in the American family system. And what did that, or how did that impact the family system? First of all, the majority family system, so that family that this woman of color may have been working for, but then also her family system, the people that she was being pulled away from. Now, again, the reason why this hits so close to home for me is because my aunt, she used to work for a family when she lived in Louisiana. She moved to Pennsylvania when my sister was born to be here with my mother and my father. So she left that position and moved here. But when she was living in Louisiana, her entire adult life until she moved here to Pennsylvania, she worked for a family as a caretaker. And so we often had conversations around kind of what that looked like for her and what that meant for her. And I could see how she implemented some of the things that she did for the family there into helping my mother and father in the raising of my brother and sister and I. So it again, it's one of those things where we look at what is the impact that it has on the family system as a whole. So the second article that we're going to be looking at this week, still talking about the family system. This article, the title of the article is LGBT Sexuality and Families at the Start of the 21st Century. In Introduction to Sociology, there was a chapter that you all had that you kind of was introduced to the family system. there's another class that you could take that we offer at the community college, and it is Families in Society, where we kind of delve deeply into the family system as a whole. One of the questions that comes up, or one of the issues that comes up when we talk about families, is that we know that the purpose of the family system as a whole, the purpose of it is to serve as an agent of socialization, meaning this is what is teaching, or what's laying the foundation for all of us to learn how to socialize. And so when we look at the family system as it exists today, excuse me, does it still serve that same function of being an agent of socialization? Do we see the family system in representing or being the same thing as what it used to look like? We know that the family system has changed. The dynamics of the family have changed. We have television shows that talk about the family system. One show in particular that comes to mind is The New Normal. When we think about the family system and we consider LGBTQ community, how does that factor into socially as a whole, our cultural norms, how we now view members of the LGBTQ community in relationship to being seen as a family? So this article here, this author begins to talk about the politics of defining and redefining the family system. And so some of the things that he highlights, areas of concern when we're talking about the family system as it pertains to the LGBTQ community. Some of the things that he talks about is still this continued public ambivalence towards the inclusion of a same-sex couple into what we're defining as a family. I don't know why we're still struggling there, good people, but yeah, the struggle continues. Something else that he talks about is the unfortunate increase in poverty rates with same-sex families. Also looking at the continuation of legal uncertainty when it comes down to the raising of children, and defining, again, for same-sex families, defining that family unit. There is also one of the things that he talks about that I just want to briefly mention is the direct and indirect stigmatization, that children may have when they're living in same-sex families. When they're living with same-sex parents as a family unit. There we go, y'all. I got it together. So these are some of the issues that this author is exploring when we're talking about how we redefine the family unit. All right, so the third article that we're going to read is by Roberta Espinoza, and this article is entitled The Good Daughter Dilemma. Oh, right there, we already see it is going to be, can I do it this way? Should I do it that way? So the title again, The Good Daughter Dilemma, Latinas Managing Family and School Demands. This author is writing this article based on her experiences in being a grad student and looking at how is she balancing the expectations of a daughter within a family unit versus the expectations that she may have for herself. And for this author, in advancing her education and going for her doctorate degree, how is she finding this balance to meet the expectations of her responsibilities as a daughter within a Latina family, but then also her own separate dreams of getting her doctorate degree. So with that being said, we see that, or in this article, we're going to see again this issue of intersectionality and how it comes together, how this daughter has responsibilities, has expectations based on her ethnicity, but also based on her personal desires and needs, and the desire to make this the pursuit of the American education, I guess you could say, that higher ed. And how am I trying to find a way, or how is she finding a way to balance this intersectionality? So that's definitely a good read, good people. So the final article, this final article that we're going to be reading actually is something that I had mentioned in a previous week. Excuse me, when we're talking about the legislation pertaining to marriage in the United States. So this final article is by Amy Steinbergler, and this article is about, or is entitled, Loving Across Racial Divides. One of the articles that I had mentioned, or not the article, I'm sorry, the account that I had mentioned in a prior week was about Loving versus the state of Virginia. And it was about an interracial couple, and they had to move from their home because it was illegal for them to be married. This author here, she explores the impact that interracial marriage has on each family member. And there's three primary ways that she, again, highlights in this article, that we see how interracial marriages have an impact on the individuals within the family system. The first one that she talks about is, unfortunately, racial neighborhoods, the challenge of belonging and being at ease in a neighborhood that you want to live in, or a neighborhood that you are currently living in. And again, this is where we get into an issue that we discussed earlier, the issue of redlining. So the first issue, of course, that racial belonging in your neighborhood. The second issue that she talks about is couples, the individuals in an interracial marriage. They may not have the same perspective on the issues of race and what may be taking place for each respective party in that marriage and in that union. The third and final issue that she talks about is that with interracial couples, there is still in that relationship a flow of power based on race and gender stereotypes. So there's a lot that she is digging up and a lot that she is exploring in this article. I'm going to post some different supplemental videos for you all to watch. Again, I'll repost the video for Loving versus the state of Virginia. There will also be supplemental videos on same-sex parents, same-sex parents and their children, and how that is kind of impacting the way that they raise their children. Again, in this module, you will have your discussion post, which I'm hoping you guys will have some interesting comments on these articles that we're reading, share your input on that, and then there will also be your assignments in the module. All right, so at this point in time, I thank you for watching, and if you need to get in contact with me, y'all know what to do. Either call me up on my office phone. I'm sorry, I had to do it, or send me an email. Y'all have my email information. All right, so at this point, I bid you love, peace, and bacon grease. Y'all have a great day.